Bottom of Daf Yud Amud Bies states the following: Bet Shamai Omer be'erev kol adam yata v'yikra. Shammai says that in the evening, when you want to read the Shema, you should lie down or lie on your side and read it. Uvavoker yamod, and in the morning you should get up, stand up preferably. Shenamar, as the verse indicates, uvishaf. As the verse says, uvishaflecha, when you lie down, uvkumecha, and when you get up. B'shah shebnei adam shochvin and b'shah shebnei adam omdim. No, I'm sorry, b'shah uvkumecha. That's Shammai. Literally, it means when you lie down, you should be lying down in the evening of Kumecha, and you should be getting up in the morning to recite the Shema. Beis Hillel omrim. Beis Hillel says, Kol adam korv kedarko. Everybody could read it as they wish. Shenemar, as it's indicated in that same section, Uvalecht chabaderech. And when you travel on the road, which means obviously if you could read the Shema when you're traveling, it doesn't matter whether you don't need to specifically be lying down in the evening or getting up, standing up in the morning. If that's the case, why does it even say when you lie down and when you get up? Hillel asks, and he answers, it's not talking about literally lying down, it's talking about a time, the time of the evening that people go to sleep, and in the morning, the time that people get up. Okay, those are the two opinions of the Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon stated, Ani hayisi ba baderech. I was traveling. V'hitisi likros k'divei Bet Shamai. And it was the evening, and I dismounted from the animal that I was on, and I lied down on the ground, even though I wasn't going to necessarily spend the night there. I was going to probably go back into the wagon, or whatever way he was traveling. But I lie down on the ground in the middle of wherever, some outdoor place, obviously, to fulfill the opinion of Bet Shamai, v'sikanti b'atzmo, and I endangered my well-being, b'nei alistim, because for the bandits that almost robbed or killed me. Amrulo, the sages responded to Rabbi Tarfon, Kadai yisi lecha b'atzmcha, you deserved it, shavarta al divrei Beis Hillel, because you went against the teachings of Beis Hillel. There's a statement that says Beis Shamai b'makam Beis Hillel. I don't know if I'm quoting the statement exactly verbatim, but the concept is correct. When there's a debate between Shammai and Hillel, and we say ain't a Mishnah, Beis Shammai ain't a Mishnah, the opinion of Shammai is not considered a valid teaching. Obviously, it's valid in terms of Torah, of learning it, but in terms of halachic application of following Beis Shammai, we don't follow them. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that, but they are just at an exception. Now we're starting with Daf Yud Aleph, which is the daf that we're doing today. The question is, let's ask whether there's a lishitaso in the various opinions of Shammai throughout. Lishitaso means a underlying premise, like when there's a Supreme Court nominee, we're trying to find out, before they get confirmed, one of the things they do is the Senate wants to hear what their ideology is. Do they have a methodology of interpreting the Constitution? Are they an originalist, or are they not an originalist? How do they see the document of the Constitution? So the same question can be asked when you have a debate between Hillel and Shammai. A lot of people like to make the statement that Shammai is more of a literalist, or what we would call an originalist, and Hillel is more of a figurative way of understanding it, or conceptually understanding it, rather than just in its most literal sense. Now, that would be a misconception to simply understand their arguments like that, because on some level, the rabbis in general were not literal relatively to, for example, what we call the Tzedukim or other sects at that time that didn't have the Torah Sheba'al Peh, didn't have the oral Torah, or at least not to the extent that we had it. But yet we might be able to say that even within the context of Torah Sheba'al Peh, Shammai was figuratively literal. I think they say it today that millennials, when they say literally, they actually mean not literally. So perhaps Shammai's literally was semi-literally, but not completely. But anyway, let's take a look at what the Gemara says about him. So the Gemara says, Bishlam beis Hillel kamafarshi tamai v'tamai beis Shammai. It makes sense that Hillel explains his rationale as well as why Shammai, what is tamai beis Shammai here? The rationale of Beis Shamai as well is also explained. Okay. So, Ela Beis Shammai, my time lo ami Beis Hillel. The question is, why doesn't Shammai agree with Beis Hillel? Beis Hillel makes perfect sense. Amilach Beis Shammai, the third line from the top, Beis Shammai would respond, Imkei nema kra beboker ve'erev. If the Torah wanted to say just the time, it could have said the time. It could have said the morning and the evening. Why is it stating when you lie down and when you get up? It means not just the time, but the literal lying down. When you're actually lying down in the evening, that's when you should recite the Shema. And when you're actually getting up in the morning, that's when you should recite the morning Shema. Ubeis Shammai, the Gemara asks, so what is the meaning of when you go on the way? Which obviously you're not lying down. When you go on the way, you're not even standing up, you're moving. That is, as we learned in the Brisa, what does the Brisa say? When you sit in your home, that excludes somebody who's preoccupied with a mitzvah. And when you're traveling, that excludes a man who's getting married. From there we said, when you marry a besula, then you don't have to recite the Shema because you're osik b'mitzvah, and the Gemara will explain that in a moment. But when you marry a widow, you don't have that same level of preoccupation. You're not as nervous about it, and therefore you would have to say the Shema, which leads us to number 2. But before we go to number 2, let's just stop for a moment to talk about Hillel and Shammai. I mentioned before the idea of Hillel and Shammai as perhaps being a way of understanding literal versus conceptual. There are other ways. So, for example, there's three times in the Gemara and Shabbos it talks about converts or non-Jews who came to first Hillel to ask to be converted under strange conditions. One of them, for example, wanted to be taught the entire Torah on one foot, and Shammai kicked him out, and Hillel told him, don't do to somebody else what you don't want done to yourself. That's the Torah. Everything else is commentary. Go and learn. And he converted him. Another one said, convert me on condition that I'll only accept the written law, not the oral law. Shammai, of course, kicked him out. Hillel brought him in and then taught him in a way that helped him understand that you can't really have a written Torah without an oral Torah, which he accepted. And then the third story is somebody who heard about the priestly garments and he wanted to convert to be a Kohen Gadol. Of course, Shammai chased him out. Hillel converted him and then eventually explained to him that even somebody who was, born a Jew and a great scholar still can't be a Kohen, never mind a Kohen Gadol, which the man accepted. The idea here is that on some level, Shammai represents like no nonsense. We're not gonna entertain fools, and Hillel, on the other hand, represented extraordinary moments and abilities of communicating the depth of the Torah, like understanding it conceptually to be able to say it's not just a bunch of laws and that they're all the Torah, period. I can't really answer your question of what is the essence of the Torah. He was able to break it down to its essence when he said, don't do to somebody else what you don't want done for you. He also was able to explain exactly the concepts of the oral Torah versus the written Torah in a way that it would make sense to people, not just something that would not allow them to accept it. And in that way, Hillel represented something that was so powerful that the rabbis say, like I said earlier, that Shammai in the place of Hillel, when Shammai argues on Hillel, ain't a Mishnah. It's not considered an actual, like, if somebody made that mistake, and there's rules, for example, if a rabbi makes a certain mistake, that mistake is like he's not liable if there's a debate amongst different rabbis of how to rule, and he ruled like the minority opinion, he's not liable necessarily for his ruling. However, sometimes he is, and in the case where he ruled like Shammai instead of Hillel, it's like that was a big mistake. He really didn't know what he was talking about at all. So in that sense, it's so clear from the Gemara, and there's many other cases, and we're going to talk about them as Hillel and Shammai figure prominently in Brachot and pretty much every tractate, and we're going to discuss more concepts of whether we could find a variety of ways of explaining based on their personalities, based on their upbringing, and based on maybe the concept in Kabbalah of the root of their soul, the concept that Shammai is more nota to din, he's more likely to lean towards judgment, and Hillel is more nota to chesed, he's more lenient. In other words, this is kind of their judiciary approach. One of them is more stringent, conservative, for lack of a better word, and the other one is more liberal, for lack of a better word. Again, I'm using current words that may really be out of place, and if somebody wants to say that those are totally stupid words, I would hear that, perhaps it's not the best words, but the words that we all understand and have to be appropriated and understood in a different context to understand kind of judiciary philosophy between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. The second teaching of the top 10 teachings is the concept of ha'osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah, which means when somebody is preoccupied with a mitzvah, we say they don't have to do another mitzvah, which is what we're just learning right now. And I'm going to share with you a great teaching of Rabbi Solovichek on that. So the Gemara says as follows. Let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara told us that we learn that from Uvaleta Chabaderech, if you are like a chassan that's marrying a besula, then you don't have to read the Kriya Shema. The Gemara talks about that. The Gemara says, "Ihachi afilu kones almananami." I skipped ahead a little bit. The Gemara asks, well, if it's because you're doing a mitzvah, even if you're marrying an almana, a widow, that's also a mitzvah. I guess the mitzvah is either the mitzvah that when you do live together, there's a mitzvah to get married. That's one potential mitzvah. Another mitzvah is possibly the mitzvah of pru or vu, of having children that happens in the marriage. But the Gemara answers, no, that's not the case. Why? High tard b'high low tard. The case of somebody marrying a basula, the man is preoccupied. He has concerns of how this is going to go down. But when he marries an almana, it doesn't have the same level of anxiety around it, and therefore he's not so preoccupied. Therefore he has the right mindset or time or both to say the Shema. The Gemara says, Imishum tirda. The Gemara then at this point thinks that the Patur, the lack of obligation to do a mitzvah when you're already doing one mitzvah is because you're preoccupied. So then it asks, based on that assumption, afilu tavas finaso b'yam. Everybody understands this to be that not the boat that you happen to be on, but if you are on dry land, but your boat, meaning your property, is sinking in the sea, and obviously you're going crazy with worry about it. Nami, also you wouldn't have to recite the Shema. In other words, any stressful, if the stock market is taking a dive, you're taking a beating and all your money is invested in the stock market, and how could you say Shema? You're under such anguish. If you say that should be the case, you won't have to read the Shema in those circumstances. We see that's not true because an Avel who is in a state of distress during the Shiva is still obligated to do the mitzvahs with the exception of tephilen, which even the tephilen, most authorities say, is only the first day of the Shiva, in addition to during the time of Aninus. We're going to get to that because that's number 3. So let's back up for a moment and let's talk about number 2, this concept of a osik b'mitzvah, somebody who's doing one mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. The main Masechta, the main tractate that deals with this concept is Masechtas Sukkah, but it comes up in many other tractates as well, as it does right here. So let's break this down. This is based on the teachings of Rabbi Joseph Solovichek. And Rabbi Solovichek looks at various opinions of the Rishonim, of the medieval commentators, and he focuses on 2 to kind of get a consensus of 2 main ways of understanding what this concept is. The first is a Tosfos, not a Tosfos, not here, but a Tosfos in the Gemara Sukkah, that says that this principle of a osik b'mitzvah, pater b'nai mitzvah, is only when you don't have time to do the second mitzvah. But if you can complete the first mitzvah that you're now preoccupied with, and then turn to the second mitzvah, you would be obligated to do both mitzvot. On the other hand, the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisan, another great commentator that is a great halachic authority, one of the Rishonim, one of the medieval commentators, he says that the concept of a osik b'mitzvah, pater b'nai mitzvah, would mean that once you start doing a mitzvah, even if you finish it, and technically speaking, you'd have enough time to do the second mitzvah, you would no longer be obligated to do the second mitzvah. Rabbi Solovichek suggests the following conceptual rationale between these 2 opinions. Rabbeinu Tam holds, the Tosfos holds, that we say the reason why when you're preoccupied with one mitzvah, you don't have to do the other mitzvah is a concept of dichui. Dichui means we push aside one for another, which means in life, you have to be able to do whatever you're doing, especially if it's a mitzvah. And if another mitzvah opportunity comes up, you can't be obligated to just kind of drop what you're doing or try to do 2 things at one time in a way that's not possible. So the mitzvah that you're doing allows you to temporarily push away any other obligations at this moment. But that pushing away doesn't take away the essence of the obligation, and it puts it on hold. Dichui is like putting it on hold. It means it's like the other mitzvah is on hold, but then as soon as you complete the mitzvah you're doing, the hold on your second mitzvah leaves, and the second mitzvah is there, and you become obligated in the second mitzvah. So that would be the explanation of Tosfos. The Ran, on the other hand, would explain the following, that when you become obligated in one mitzvah, it takes away any obligation of the other mitzvah. So you become patur, you become in the status of no longer obligated in the second mitzvah. So even though you then complete the first mitzvah, you retain your status of not being obligated in the second mitzvah. One way to understand this is, I studied this in Hasidus many years ago, of this concept of a osik b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah, is what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is like the limbs of the body. And each mitzvah strengthens the limbs of the body, spiritually speaking. Physically, I don't know so much. Not as clear as definitely on the spiritual side and the intellectual and emotional side, each part of the body, which is connected to a part of the soul. And we learned yesterday that the soul and the body is like a mashal, like an analogy between God and the universe. So that's a very powerful concept of God filling the universe, the soul filling the body, and each mitzvah kind of actualizing a part of the soul into the body. Okay, that's a concept, it's a Talmudic concept that says that 248 positive mitzvahs correspond to the 248 remach ivarim, the limbs of the body or bones of the body or parts of the body. So, what does this have to do with Osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah? So the Alter Rebbe and probably others in Chassidus explain the following: when you are doing one mitzvah, you're giving vitality to a particular part of your neshama, of your guf, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when you're able to do that, it in a sense, since the body and the soul are all interconnected, that part of you that's getting that light of the mitzvah somehow allows the rest of you to also be complete enough at that time that you don't have to worry about doing a second mitzvah because you're already getting the light. So that's one explanation. Okay, let's talk about nafka minas in halacha. That means halachic distinctions that would come about based on the way Rabbi Solovichek explains the distinctions between the opinion of Tosfos and the Ran. One, for example, who, let's say, was this chassan and didn't have a chance to say Kriya Shema in the evening, and for that matter, didn't daven Ma'ariv, would that person be obligated the next morning to say Shmon Esrei a second time? The second time would be what we call b'toras tashlumin, a makeup for the fact that they missed something. There is this concept of tashlumin. It's like a carbon that you bring a makeup thing. So you missed it the first time. Now you make up the second time. If you say like the Ran that says if you miss a mitzvah because you were doing another mitzvah, it's like you were never obligated really to do the second mitzvah, so you don't have to make up for something that you really were essentially not obligated to do. You wouldn't have to make it, the chassan wouldn't have to daven twice shachris. But if you learned like Tosfos, possibly, Rabbi Solovichek explores, possibly, or any time you were doing a mitzvah and you missed out another mitzvah and you missed out on davening, you'd have to daven a makeup davening, not the whole davening, but a makeup Shmon Esrei, because even though you had a reason not to do it when you missed it, but now that you have the time and you can do the makeup, you can still do it. In other words, the question is, in a philosophical terms, did the light that you created in the world and in your soul and in the universe from the mitzvah that you did do, did that light compensate for the light of the second mitzvah that you weren't able to do? And it didn't matter that you didn't do the second mitzvah. The light is there. You're not missing anything. Or do we say that there's still some potential to regain the light, to go make a tashlumin? And that's the question that Rabbi Solovichek says is a nafka mina, a halachic distinction that will come out of which way we paskin in this question. Okay, we continue with number. There's a lot more on this, but because this is a shir that I have to go quickly, I'm going to have to go to number 3. The number 3 is we say that a mourner doesn't put on tephilen, and the question is when and why do we say this? It's not during the whole shiva. Everybody goes to shiva minyan, and we see in the morning the mourner is putting on tephilen, so this can't be right, or can it be? So let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Chutz minat tefillin, that a mourner is obligated in mitzvahs with an exception of tefillin. Why is that? Sharei nemar behem pe'er, because in the book of Yecheskel, they're referred to as pe'er. Pe'er is something of pride. Shenemar pe'er chachav v'sholecha. What happens in the book of Yecheskel is his wife dies, and God requires that Yecheskel not perform the regular rituals of mourning. Now, what is usually a mourner at some point in their mourning, we'll discuss when, doesn't have tefillin on, but in the case of Yecheskel, he says, no, you have to retain your tefillin because you're not allowed to mourn. So, Zok Rashi, that's Yiddish for Rashi, says, Rashi says the following. Chutz minat tephilen, I'm starting in the middle of Rashi, right here, chutz minat tephilen, shnemar behem pe'er, liyachaskel, pe'er chacha v'sholecha, v'kiven debai pe'er, since generally tephilen need this level of pride, v'avel misgolel b'tzaro, and the avel is roiled in their anguish, their pain, b'afar, in afar afer, like ashes. Now, what ashes are we talking about? There's this concept that you put the ash on the forehead. Ein zeh pe'er. It's not beautiful. It's not distinguished to have tefillin on at that time. So Rashi, in a number of places, says things that on face value seem to be saying differing opinions of why we wouldn't put on tefillin when one would be a mourner. Let me look up in my notes. And they are as follows. One of them would be that, I just read you that one. There's another one that's very close to what we just said. Another Rashi somewhere else that says, Ma'olel be'efer karno. Which is similar that he's in this, he's more in this distress with this ash on him. Other places would seem okay. So the question is Rashi saying it's because the tefillin require a certain kind of beautification that's antithetical to the way you're supposed to present yourself in mourning, particularly because of this afar, afer, and that would be the case. So that's how we can reconcile that all of the different statements of Rashi are really the same. It's not one or the other. It's not that tefillin, you can't do tefillin because tefillin is so amazing, and you can't do something amazing when you're in mourning, or because aveilus is something that's so terrible, and when you're in a terrible place, you can't do tefillin. It's the combination. It's that they are the antithesis of each other. Tefillin is showing pride and beauty in a spiritual sense, and mourning, you're showing a sense of sadness that's taken on a physical expression where you put something like ash on your forehead to show your state of grief. And those two things just don't go together. Okay, so that's a svara. There are other svaras that say, I think the Or Zarua brings down that tefillin need concentration, and you do not have the power of concentration when you are in a state of mourning. The Gemara here points out that you are required to do the other mitzvos because even though you are, in a sense, doing a mitzvah, the way the commentaries explain it, the mitzvah of aveilus is primarily what you don't do. You don't have a regular bath. You don't anoint yourself in a regular way. You don't wear your leather shoes. Those are the things that you don't do. It's not like you're doing something. What you are doing is, it's called a kiyum bolev in kind of brisker terminology. You're fulfilling the aveilus in your heart by feeling a certain agmas nefesh. That agmas nefesh is not enough of a mitzvah, Rashi says. It's not enough of a mitzvah. You're not required to do that. That's something that comes and goes. It doesn't have the permanence that you have to hold on to it to get in the way of your obligation to do mitzvos like Kriya Shema and davening. So, a little bit about when. When is it that you don't put on tefillin? So everybody says that when the day of the death, you don't put on tefillin. And some people continue to say that as long as the person is an onain, they should not put on tefillin. Of course, there might be some exceptions. If the person is an onain for a long time, for some reason, they should ask a rabbi, a shaila. Like I said, there might be exceptions. But in general, in the period of aninus, Again, with some exceptions, there might be some, I think there might be a Chabad custom that does have people putting on tefillin after the first day of Aninus. I'm not sure about all the different customs, but in general, the rove of the Rishonim and the Achronim say that an Oneh does not put on tefillin. What about the first day of Shiva? There again, the rove of the Rishonim and the Achronim say you do not put on tefillin the first day of Shiva, and not just when the first day of Shiva is the same day of the death, but even when the death happened on an earlier day than the burial and the beginning of Shiva, you still don't have to put on tefillin, which means a lot of times somebody dies a day or two before, and then a day or two later is the burial. It could be a 9, 10 o'clock burial. And does the people have to run back home and put on tefillin when they still can? And the answer is, like I said, the majority say no. However, there is a minority of people that say they have to, and some people actually still follow that opinion. And that opinion is the Ma'ari Tats, and some contemporary halachic poskim do paskin like that. And some poskim say to make a peshara, which means to make kind of an intermediate way of doing practice. They'll put on tefillin without a bracha if the first day of Shiva is not, again, this is all when the first day of Shiva is not on the day of death. What about the rest of today? Everyone puts on tefillin from the second day of Shiva and onward. By the way, the first day of Shiva is usually in the afternoon, because the Shiva starts as soon as the burial is over. It might even just be a very short first day of just hours or even minutes. So what about the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth day, seventh day of Shiva? We see very clearly that everyone puts on tefillin. However, in the Gemara in Moed Katan, I didn't have time to review it. I've learned it in the past. I remember it seemed like there were certain shitos that said that either the first few days a person should avoid putting on tefillin, definitely when there was a panim chadashot, when there was a new person that came in. Possibly what that meant is, I think the way I understood it is, people would keep their tefillin on all day, and when there would be new visitors, if nobody new was there, so then the person could keep his tefillin on. But if a new person came in, it wasn't polite to keep your tefillin on, but it didn't mean that the person couldn't put on tefillin during the entire Shiva or half of the Shiva. What rather it meant is a person shouldn't really stay in their tefillin when new visitors are coming. Again, not really relevant today because we don't keep our tefillin on all day. Perhaps people who now have reclaimed that custom in Eretz Yisrael would be makbid not to keep the tefillin on all day as an aval. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4 is the question of what do we do today? We rule like Beis Hillel in almost all times. And if you did like Beis Shamai, the Gemara says it's like you did nothing. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the parameters of this concept, and I'll learn some brisker Torahs on that. Okay, let's see what the Gemara says. So, Gemara says a story and between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah made sure to read the Shema lying down, and Rabbi Yishmael did not do it like that. And there's a little story about that. And first, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was upset at Rabbi Yishmael, and he expressed his upsetness. And then Rabbi Yishmael answered, what are you talking about? I did like Beis Hillel, Beis Shamai. You went like Beis Shamai. Don't be upset at me. You were wrong. And furthermore, it's not just that you did it wrong and I did it right. It was very problematic in what you did, because maybe when a rabbi, a great rabbi, does something, their students note what they do, and based on their actions, are koveya, they establish the halacha. So it's not just like, oh, your preference is you want to be stricter. No, you are creating a potential misunderstanding in what the halacha is, and that's very problematic. What does that mean? Not only that, but maybe you could argue Hillel doesn't care which way you do it. He says if you want to lie down, lie down. I don't care. He says that's only if you were already lying. Now, since Rabbi Joseph was already standing, and then he made a particular point to lie down. People will say, look, he holds specifically like Bet Shamai, and they'll mistakenly try to establish the halacha like Bet Shamai. So Tani Rabbi Cheskel, Asa K'divrei Bet Shamai, Asa K'divrei Bet Hillel, Asa. Rabbi Cheskel says it doesn't matter. If you do it, you did it. Whichever way, you're still good. Rabbi Joseph, Amar, Asa K'divrei Bet Shamai, Asa L'klum. Rabbi Joseph, who we follow, says if you did like Bet Shamai, it's like you did nothing. Ditznan, we learned in the Gemara. I'm not going to do this Gemara. It's a Gemara in Sukkah. I have to start moving it along, so I'm going to just give over some of the brisker tires. There's two ways. First of all, in the poskim, there's two ways to paskin. Let's say somebody didn't listen, and specifically they were standing up and they lied down to say the Shema. They made a point to lie down to say the Shema, and then they got back up to do whatever they needed to do. Do they have to read the Shema a second time because they did something like Shammai, and you're not supposed to do something that looks like you're specifically paskening like Shammai, because then people might be confused and think that we have to follow Shammai, and we don't? Or do we say, well, they were wrong to do that, but the expression, it's like they did nothing, is, I remember there's one of the Rosh Hashivas giving Musar says, if you learn and you don't do Chazar, you did nothing. Does that literally mean you did nothing? It doesn't mean you did nothing. It means it's not so valuable. It's not, you didn't do it right. You have to do Chazar. So the same thing would be here. It doesn't mean you actually didn't do the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. It just means you didn't do it right. You don't have to do it again, but you should have done it the proper way. That's one way of understanding it. The other way is, no, you actually have to go back and do it again. So there's halachic consequences. Most people hold the first way, which is you did something wrong, but you still did it. Rabbi Solovichek and others explain the following. There's two ways. When you do a mitzvah, there's two aspects of a mitzvah. There's Maisa HaMitzvah, which means the act of doing a mitzvah, and there's the kiyum of the mitzvah. There's the fulfilling your obligation in doing the mitzvah. And sometimes you could technically do the Maisa HaMitzvah. You did the act of doing the mitzvah. So on an objective level, the mitzvah was done, but there's something subjective in the governor, the person, who lacked some element of how they're supposed to fulfill the mitzvah. So for example, it could be when it comes to davening Shemona Esrei in the morning, right? You're supposed to daven Shemona Esrei specifically after Birchas Kriya Shema. So you fulfill your obligation to daven either way. The Maisa mitzvah of davening, of the Shemona Esrei, you did, regardless of whether you did it or not in the right order. But at the same sense, you're missing in the way you're supposed to do it. The person is missing the way they were told to do it. They're missing something. So that would be the same question here. When it says lo asav lo klum, that they did nothing, doesn't mean that the rabbis rabbinically remove the biblical fulfillment of the mitzvah, even though the person biblically fulfilled the mitzvah, the rabbis have the power to undo it somehow? Or does it just mean the rabbis are not undoing it, but they're decrying the fact that he's missing in the kiyum, in the way the rabbis establish of what the meaning of b'shachcha of kamecha that goes like we follow Hillel, and this person did it really an avera in the rabbinic understanding. They transgressed a rabbinic understanding in how they recited the Shema, so they're missing in the kiyum of Kriya Shema. That's a debate that of how to explain this to understand this. Now we go to number 5. The Gemara, there's a Mishnah on the bottom. I'll quickly do the Mishnah. B'shachar mevarech shtayim. In the morning, when we recite the Shema, we make 2 blessings leading up to the Shema, ve'achas la'achreha, and one afterwards. V'erev mevarech shtayim lefaneha v'shtayim la'achreha. And the evening we make 2 before the Shema and 2 after the Shema, 2 blessings. Achas erucha ba'achas kasar. One is long, one is short. There's a discussion of what does that mean. Makom she'amur laharach and erishoy lekatzer. When we say to be long, you shouldn't be short. Lekatzer and erishoy laharach. When they say to be short, it's not right to be long, and that has to do primarily with the chasima, the conclusion of the blessing when you're concluding with a baruch, with a baruch atah Hashem. Lachsam and erishoy shalom lachsam. This is the one about the conclusion. When they say to conclude, right? What the certain blessings have a chasima, you begin with a bracha and end with a baruch atah, and others don't. Like when you make a bracha on a fruit, you just make baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. You don't say another bracha at the end like we do in, let's say, Birchas Hamazon or the Amidah. And Rishon Lachtom. Okay, so let's just grab a siddur here. And I just pulled out an art scroll, Ashkenaz siddur, and there's so many different siddurim. Just to tell you what are we talking about here? So the first bracha, and this is going to be relevant to this teaching, is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Yotzer or Uvorei Choshech. Blessed are you, our Lord God, our God, King of the world universe. Yotzer are who creates or forms light, uvarei choshech, and creates darkness. Oseh shalom uvarei sakol. That's the who makes peace and creates all. Now that is a quote or misquote, more accurately, from Isaiah 45:7. The Gemara will talk about why it's misquoting it. And where it's misquoting it, and then that's the psicha, that's the opening for the blessing, and the blessing continues. He who illuminates the earth and those who dwell upon it with compassion, and then that bracha concludes with Baruch atah Hashem Yotzer Hamaoros. Right, it has a chasima. It concludes with the Baruch, with blessed are you, Lord our God, who fashions the luminaries. I should be saying Hashem's name here. And then the second blessing is either Ahava Rabba or Avas Olam, which we're going to talk about the difference between them, which means either a big love or a love of the universe God loved us with. And that talks about our getting close to God through the Torah and the mitzvos. And then it concludes with, again, Baruch atah Hashem habocher ba'ama Yisrael bi'ava. Blessed are you, Hashem, who chooses his nation Israel out of love. Then we say the Shema. Then after the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, we have the blessing that comes afterwards, which is V'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam. Right? Certain, established, enduring, fair, and faithful. And it's got all these different paragraphs, but it's really all, don't be misled by the different paragraphs to thinking it's different blessings. It's all one blessing. And then it concludes with Baruch atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael. Blessed are you, Hashem, the Redeemer of Israel. That's the famous Geula, redemption, that then leads into tefillah, that leads into the Amidah. Okay, so that's some of the basics here that we're going to be referring to on Yud Aleph Amud Beis, on 11b. So what we're going to now do in quick succession is this concept of, we began by saying Yotzer, or number 5 is in the top 10 teachings, is in order to mention the distinctions of day at night and the distinction of night during the day. And then number 6 is going to be the love of the universe versus big love. And number 7 is the prayer, Ahava Rabba, as Birchat Hatorah. Okay, let's do 5 and 6 right now. We'll get to 7 soon. So 5 is this idea of mentioning the day at night and the night during the day. So let's see what the Gemara says. The Gemara asks, Yotzer or avare choshech, lema yotzer or avare noga. The Gemara asks, why do we say in the beginning, Yotzer or he forms light and creates darkness? Why don't we say it nicer? Why don't we say Yotzer or he forms light, avare noga, and he creates noga? What is noga? Noga also means light. But we know from certain Gemaras that Noga is not light; it's actually night. But it's a beautiful way of saying Noga. It's similar to what the Gemara says in Or Arba Asar, the night of the 14th, but it calls the night light. And the Gemara has a very extended conversation. Why I would even say something, it's a little bit confusing. And we learn out from there that the Torah prefers us to speak in a positive language. So it's a very powerful concept of the power of speech and using positive expression. So the Gemara is saying, why don't we use this positive expression? Well, we know that Noga really means night, even though it has this very kind of lovely term. It usually refers to something about light, and yet it means night. So the Gemara says, no, Kidduch, we're not going to change the verse. The verse in Isaiah doesn't say Noga. It says Choshech, darkness. Kaminan. Ela Me'atas. So the Gemara says, oh, you're saying because we're quoting? It's not an actual verbatim quote of the verse. Because it says, Osa Shalom Avarei Ra. The actual verse says, God makes peace and creates evil. This is a big theological question of where does evil come from. I don't have time to stop and talk about the verse in Isaiah. But that's not what we say. We say, Osa Shalom Avarei Es HaKol. We make it, we kind of defang the power of that statement to say God creates peace and makes everything. We don't acknowledge God making evil in our morning prayers, which is almost like we're cleaning up the verse. So if we're already cleaning up, why don't you clean it up all the way and also say Noga? So the Gemara's question seems to come back. Rather, we don't say it the way it's stated. We say Hakol instead of evil. So the Gemara says in Lishna Maya, because we want to create positive terms, not negative. Why don't we also clean up the beginning of that statement, of that verse, and change it into a more positive word of Noga instead of Laila? Amar Rava. What's the reason? Rava responds, what's the point of why we're saying this? Because we want to mention the attribute or the distinction of the evening. The attribute of the day in our evening prayer, in our evening Birchas Kriyashma, and Midas Laila, the attribute or distinction of the evening, Bayom, during the day, which is what this prayer is. Now, Bishlem Midas Laila Bayom Kedamrinan Yotzer Or Ubar Choshech. That makes sense in this prayer, as it just says, the one who forms light and creates darkness. Let me just stop for a moment. What that means is the following. We say the Kriya Shema in the morning and the evening. And the Kriya Shema is connected to the day. The day is connected to the sun. Even if it's not, there's a halachic issue about dawn versus sunrise, and we already discussed that the closer it gets to sunrise, the more day it is. And by sunrise, it's like there's no way of denying the dayness of it. But it's really technically, halachically, for certain things, already day from dawn. We're just not really so sure of it being day because most people don't think of it as day already. But clearly, by the time, and dawn is really is that which precedes the day. It's the beginning of the day, even if it's not fully recognized as such. So that means that we're praising God, and when the night turns to day. But we don't worship the day per se, just like we don't worship the night. So we want to do what we call inclusion. What do I mean by inclusion? When we praise God during the day for creating the day, we also want to mention the night. So it's not like that there's a famous medrash about Abraham that when he was either 3 or 40, he started investigating as who is the true God? And in the beginning, he saw the sun, and he felt the sun is the true God. But then the moon came, and he thought, okay, well, there's no sun, it must be the moon. And then the moon also left. So what that means is each of those represent different powers. We actually want to understand that there is no one power. All the physical power are to be understood as integrated within each other, not at odds that one needs to be worshipped and the other one is nothing. They're all part of God's creation. And that's why we mention the night during the day and the day during the night. Okay, that's a little bit about that Gemara. We're going to go on to number 6, which is the big love versus the universal love, or love of the universe. The Gemara says the following. So, v'idach maihi, what's the second blessing? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ava Rabba, b'chein ori le Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Pidas, Beredi, Rabbi Avad, Tanya Mehachi, and Avos Olam, Ela Ava Rabba. Some rabbis say it begins with the words great love. V'rabanan ami Avos Olam, b'cheinu Omer v'Avos Olam hafticha. The rabbis say, no, you say Avos Olam, the love of the universe. Now, some people say Avos Olam in the morning and Ava Rabba at night. They want to, make all the rabbis happy. A lot of us like to make everyone happy, so we say everything, or Ava Rabba in the morning and Avos Olam at night. Other people just say Avos Olam. Okay. A little bit about this. Just Shlomo Carlebach was quoting. I don't remember who was quoting, but it's a beautiful teaching. He says, "What is Avos Olam? What is the love of the universe?" So he said, "Avos Olam is all the love that ever was for all of eternity. Put it all together, and that's the love that God loves us with." And then the question, well, that's awesome. That's deep. So the question then is, if that's why would you want to do Ava Rabba? Why would you want to have a great love if it could be Avos Olam, the love of all loves that were ever loved are included in that love? And the answer is that Avos Olam comes from, this is based on Chassidus, that Avos Olam comes from the love of contemplating the physical world and understanding that all of the world is just an aspect of God's light. It doesn't even reflect His essence. It's just a little tiny revelation that He's so well beyond. But it comes from appreciating the world and God that's revealed through the world. And Ava Rabba is the type of love that exceeds even that. It's when we focus on the God that's above and beyond the world. That everything in the world is nothing compared to that infinite. And so some people like to go through finite. They like to go through the stuff they experience, the sensations, and then love God because God is the source of all that. And other people love to just get to the infinite, and that might be one way of explaining, according to Chassidus, the difference between these two terms, Avos Olam and Ava Rabba. That's number 7. Oh no, that's number 6. Now we're up to number 7, which is the prayer of Ava Rabba or Avos Olam as Birchas Hatorah. Okay, let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, Amar Shmuel, Hashkim lishnos ad shelo kara kriya shma tzarich levarech. If you got up early and you wanted to study Torah before you read the Shema and its blessings, you have to make a blessing on the Torah, Birchas Hatorah. Mishakara kriya shma, once you read the Shema with its blessings, ein tzarich levarech, you no longer have to make Birchas Hatorah shekvar niftar be'ava Rabba, because you already fulfilled your obligation with Ava Rabba. What is Ava Rabba? Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit to you from Ava Rabba. Basically, Ava Rabba says, Avinu Avarachman Amrachman Rachman Aleinu Seimu B'nei B'nei L'Hamas L'Shma God, who has compassion on us, put into our hearts to understand and to contemplate, to hear, to learn, to teach, to guard, to do, to fulfill all of the words of the Talmud, of your Torah with love. Enlighten us in your Torah. Make our hearts cleave to your mitzvahs. Unify our hearts in love and in awe of your name. And may we not be embarrassed. And you chose us from all the nations of the world and bring us close. I'm skipping a little bit. Bring us close to you in truth. to be grateful to you and to unify you in love. Blessed are you, Hashem, who chooses his nation Israel in love. What we see from here is that, the Birchas Kriya Shema are not just a blessing on the Shema. I think it's a Meiri who says there is such a thing as a simple blessing of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. The formal blessing you'd make on anything. Likro es Shema, something like that, to recite the Shema. Nobody paskins like that today, that if you, for example, didn't have time to daven, you just make a blessing on the Shema. We don't do that. So why do we do these lengthy blessings? And to me, that's essential to understanding what all the Gemara Brachos is that Brachos is essentially a way of helping us understand that Torah is not learning alone. Torah is really about being in a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Birchas Hatorah of Ahava Rabba is what is it really saying? It's saying Hashem loves us and he gave us the Torah. And what is somebody who really, if you love your child, what do you want to do with your child? You want to give them instructions that helps them with their life. You don't want to just give them money, because then they won't know how to handle the money. You don't want to just give them a gift that will hurt them. You want to give them a gift of their wholeness, of their shleimus. That shleimus is by teaching them how to live. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, so he gives us the Torah. And the Torah includes all these amazing things in it. So that is Birchas HaTorah. That's the blessing on Torah. And that's the same blessing we make for the Shema, because Shema says V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, that the Torah requires of you to be in a relationship with God that's a loving relationship. You can only love somebody that you understand. That's a basic premise in Chabad Hasidus, but really you don't have to be Chabad to believe that you need to be able to recite V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, I love you, Hashem, or you love Hashem with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your being, that there needs to be something that you're able to do to actually feel that. And if Torah doesn't do that, you're not really learning the Torah. You're not learning the Torah that Ahava Solam or Ahava Rabba is talking about. You're learning something else. You're still stuck in your ego. You're still not in a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You are still not learning Lishma. Okay, a little musar here, because I come from musar people. You gotta understand that Torah is not a competition. Torah is not your ego to be bragging about how much Torah I learned. If you do that, you are a balgaiva. You are just an arrogant person. And arrogance comes with Torah scholarship. That is exactly what the Baal Shem Tov was all about. The Baal Shem Tov was fighting Torah that was not Lishma. There's a beautiful response to that by Reb Chaim of Volozhin and the Nefesh HaChaim. Okay, but even the Nefesh HaChaim is a reconciliation of why you could be Lishma, because you still love Torah. But the fact remains that you need to have at some point Ava. You have to have a relationship, an emotional relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a hakara in the bara, recognition of the Creator. And that's what this bracha says. This is Gemara, my friends. This is not Hasidus. This is not Kabbalah. This is Gemara. This is Gemara. Okay, that's enough of my ranting over here. What were we up to? So that's a little bit about this concept here of, then of course there's Tosfos and a Yerushalmi. Getting back into the practical of this, there's a Yerushalmi that says, I'm going to read it from the Tosfos. B'Yerushalmi yesh hadaminon shikvar nifter b'Ahava Rabba v'hu sheshona al asar pirush la'alter shalomad miyad ba'osam makom. The Yerushalmi says, yes, Ahava Rabba works as Birchas Torah on one condition, that after you daven right away, go and learn something. Now, as the Shaila and the Rishonim, was the Yerushalmi only talking about Ahava Rabba, or was he talking about regular Birchas Torah also that your person would have to learn after saying Birchas Torah? Okay. Anyway, enough of that for now. It's beautiful. There's so much. This is a beautiful sugya. We have to learn it all day, but we have to go on because they're expecting me, and I have to go somewhere. So let's go quickly to number 8. What part of Torah requires Birchas Hatorah? So the Gemara says the following. And Amar Rav Huna, Lemikra tzarech levarech, lemedrash ain't tzarech levarech. Rav Huna says if you're reading a pasuk in the Torah, you need to have Birchas Hatorah, but if you're reading a medrash like the Sifra, the Sifri, then you don't need to make Birchas Hatorah. What does that mean? It means that the etzem of the Torah is the Torah in its most primal form, which is Torah Shebechsav. Once you get into the pirush of Torah Shebechsav in medrash, that doesn't. You don't have to make Birchas Torah on it. Okay. That's one opinion. Rabbi Elazar Omer lemikra u'lemedrash. He says no. Even if it's not just the written word, it's also the medrash, right? You also have to make a Birchas Torah. But the Mishnah ain't tzarich levarech. For the Mishnah is like the halacha, like the Mishnayos, so to speak. That you don't have to make a bracha. Now the question is, what do you mean? What's the difference? If you're already saying there's a Torah Sheba'al Peh that needs a bracha, why stop at the halacha? The answer would be the following: the Medrash is interpreting; it's directly on the pasuk. However, once you get to the Mishnah, we don't even know what pasuk. It might be on a pasuk, it may not be. It's not directly on a pasuk. It's not set up as a pirush on the Chumash, so therefore it's too removed to have to be required to have Birchas Torah. You have to remember also, maybe they made a distinction between the Torah, the D'oraisa, and the D'Rabbanan, or within the learning, because, example, you could be learning something where the Mishnayos is not even talking about a Chiyuv D'oraisa, it's only a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. It was interesting. Today, Lamaisa, we say that any Torah is, you get the mitzvah of Limud Torah in any Torah, even if you're not just learning Torah Sheba'al Peh, you're learning Torah Sheba'al Peh about something that's only a Gzer D'Rabbanan. It's still, you're fulfilling an obligation of Limud of Torah D'oraisa. Okay, let's continue. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Afla Mishnah Mitzvah Levarech, but not for Talmud. This Talmud is too far, it's too much in your svar. Okay, I just came up with pshat right now, and the final opinion is Rabbi Amar Afla Talmud Tzarech Levarech. My pshat is very simple. It goes on with what I was just ranting about a moment ago, and it goes as follows. The more the thing comes into the seichel, the person's intellect, which is what Gemara ultimately is, the more the person is absorbed with their understanding of the Torah. When it's just Torah Shebechsav, when it's just the written word of Torah, that's God's Torah. When it's Torah Sheba'al Peh, especially when it's Gemara, it's my, give me my portion. It's already like I have a relationship to it. So the Birchas Hatorah is to connect the Torah, the giver of the Torah, to the Torah that I'm learning. So when it's more clear to me that I'm learning God's Torah, that's when I need the bracha. But the other opinions that say no, even when I'm learning our Torah, the Torah that humans are more a part of creating, we also need to make a bracha. Maybe on the contrary, because we are more involved in it, we need it even more desperately to recognize and realize that it's the Dvar Hashem, Zu Halacha, the Word of God, in the Halacha, in the Mishnah, in the Medrash, and in the Gemara. Okay, it's a very interesting concepts here. Now, number 9 is different blessings that the rabbis said, and today we say them all. Let's see what the Gemara says. My mevarech, what's the bracha? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Asher Kidshanim Musos B'Tzivanu La'asok B'Divrei Sarah. So he says the bracha is, the regular nusach habracha of the beginning of a bracha. La'asok, to be osek. In the words of Torah, osek means to work, like when you're working on something really hard, right? It's not just that you're learning, but it's like, there's a special mitzvah in Talmud Torah in Yiddish we call it haravanya. Haravanya means that you're breaking yourself and like working through a sugya. Like, it's a beautiful thing when you want to stop and give up, and you push yourself a little more. So that's la'asok. Rabbi Yochanan Messiah Bahachi. Rabbi Yochanan would conclude that Harevna Hashem Elokeinu Zdivis Harascha B'Finu V'Fiyasam Chal Beis Yisrael V'Ni Anachnu B'Tzeinu V'Tzeitayam Chal Beis Yisrael Kulonu Yoda Shemecha V'Oskei Harasecha Baruch Atah Hashem HaMalamed Torah Lama Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan would add on these beautiful things. So it's a song, many songs. Make it sweet, please, Hashem, my God, the words of your Torah in my mouth, and the mouths of your people of Israel, and me and my descendants, and the descendants of my descendants, all the house of Israel should all be learning Torah, should know your name, right? Because we say all of the Torah is Hashem's names, and we should be learning Torah. Some people actually say Lishma, right? So and then the end, another bracha at the end as well, who Hashem teaches us. Reb Hamnuna Amar, another one. And Asher Bachar B'Adam Mikol Ha'amim, who chose us from the nations. V'nasal lanu es terasa, Baruch Atah Hashem nos Hatorah. Amar Rav Hamnuna Zeh Me'ula Shel Brachos. Rav Hamnuna says, this is the best. Hilkach Laminu L'chulu. Therefore we say, let's say them all. It's interesting, that's what we do today. We say all these brachos. There's different shiurim, there's different mefarshim that talk about why each one made the bracha that they made, and how each bracha brings out an element, a component of Torah. And therefore, by saying them all, we because it's a question, like on some level, we don't try to make more brachas than we needed. It's a bracha levatala. But because we say that each of these brachos are in another aspect of Torah that has to be brought out, it's not a bracha levatala. On the contrary, it's the right thing to do. Okay, that also needs a little bit of a conversation, meaning when the Chacham or Kovea a bracha, even if it seems that there's an overlap, if there's elements that are expanded on by the variety of brachos, so then we don't consider that a bracha levatala. Number 10 is the morning service in the Beis Hamikdash. I'm just going to read this to you, and tomorrow the Gemara on Yud Beis Amud Aleph will continue talking about this. It's on Hassam, Aron Lehem Mamuna Baruch Bracha Achas, the Sgan, the assistant to the Kohen Gadol, the chief of staff of the Kohen Gadol would say, Baruch Bracha Achas, make one bracha. The Gemara will discuss what that is. V'hem Baruchu V'karu Aser Sadibros. They made that one blessing, then they read the Aser Sadibros. We don't do Aser Sadibros. We'll find out why not on the next daf. Shema B'Hayim Shemoah. Then they would say Shema in the first and second paragraph, and Vayomer in the third paragraph. Uvarchos Amagil Brachos. They would give the people the Birchas Kohanim, priestly blessings, and then Birchas Emes V'Yatziv, the blessings that would come after, that we say ordinarily after Kriya Shema. V'Avoda U'Birchas Kohanim. I'm sorry. The Gimel Brachos was not Birchas Kohanim, clearly, because Birchas Kohanim came later. Let's see. Brachos Ima'am. Okay. So basically, they had this altered version of what we do today. They left out one of the Birchas Kriya Shema, and they added in Aseret Sadibros after, before. Was it before Kriya Shema or after Kriya Shema? Yeah, they did it before Kriya Shema. So we see a bunch of things. They didn't do Shmon Esrei because they didn't have time. There's a whole conversation with, were they even really being Yotze the Shema because it was too early, and people would say one of the blessings later with the Shema also presumably. So it's a whole conversation because it makes sense in the context of our Gemara, because we say a lot of the things that we're doing today is because that became the matbeh shel tefillah, not just of the Shemona Esrei, but also the Birchas Kriya Shema and the hemshech, kind of the flow from one bracha to the next, and no interruptions, obviously, between Gal Yisrael and the Shemona Esrei Gula L'Tefillah. This is, it's pretty clear that the Chazal are kind of putting these things into place. They weren't always exactly in this place, as we see from what they did in the time of the Avot, when they had the Beis HaMikdash. And the question only becomes, b'shas hadchak, when for some reason we can't do one of these mitzvahs in the right time, do we, knowing the formulas, how they were constructed, do we ever deconstruct them for halachic purposes? I don't have time for that today, but hopefully we'll get to that tomorrow. Thank you for listening.